Can one man die to his reputation twice and still rise to lead a nation of 200 million? In the heart of West Africa, a figure emerged who would become both a savior and a shadow. He was a soldier who once crushed dissent with an iron fist, only to return decades later wearing the robes of a democrat. This is the chilling chronicle of power, discipline, and the enduring enigma of a leader who defined Nigeria's most turbulent historical chapters. Born in the dusty plains of Daura in 1942, he was the 23rd child of his father. The harsh landscape of northern Nigeria forged a character of stoicism and unyielding principle. In these rural settlements, life was governed by tradition and strict values. Young and lean, he sought a path that would take him far beyond the cattle grazing fields. He looked toward the military, a rising force in a country recently freed from the shackles of its colonial past. By 1962, the young recruit joined the Nigerian Military Training College. His discipline was immediate and terrifying. While his peers enjoyed the freedoms of a newly independent nation, he obsessed over order and hierarchy. He was sent to Mons Officer Cadet School in the United Kingdom, where he refined his tactical mind. Returning to a Nigeria fractured by ethnic tensions, he was no longer just a boy from Daura, he was a commissioned officer ready for a coming storm. The 1960s were a bloodbath for the young republic. Military coups and a brutal civil war tore the fabric of society apart. The young officer was thrust into the front lines, witnessing the horrors of a nation divided. He saw firsthand the chaos that corruption and political instability could breed. These experiences hardened him, instilling a lifelong belief that only the military could provide the discipline necessary to keep the diverse ethnic groups of Nigeria from total collapse. His rise through the ranks was meteoric. By the mid-1970s, he was appointed the governor of the northeastern state. It was his first taste of civilian administration, but he ruled it like a barracks. He moved with a cold efficiency that unsettled his subordinates. This was not a man of compromise, he was a man of commands. In his vast territory, he began to build the reputation of an incorruptible but uncompromising figure who tolerated absolutely no deviation from his rules. In 1976, he became the Federal Commissioner for Petroleum and Natural Resources. He was at the helm when the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation was born. Billions of dollars in oil wealth began to flow, but so did allegations of massive corruption. Though he maintained his personal image of austerity, the murky world of global oil trading would haunt his legacy for years. He learned that in Nigeria, control over oil was the ultimate weapon of the political and military elite. New Year's Eve, 1983, changed everything. As the clock struck midnight, tanks roared through the streets of Lagos. The civilian government of Shehu Shagari was toppled in a bloodless coup d'etat. The military accused the politicians of bringing the nation to its knees through greed. When the smoke cleared, the lean, stern-faced Major General emerged as the new head of state. The democratic experiment had failed, and the era of the iron fist had officially returned to Nigeria. His first speech as leader was a chilling warning to the nation. He spoke of a country plagued by indiscipline and a lack of direction. He did not come to give speeches, he came to enforce order. He suspended the constitution and banned all political parties. To many Nigerians, his arrival was a relief from the chaos of the previous years. However, to the press and the political class, it was the beginning of a terrifying period of absolute surveillance. Then came the War Against Indiscipline, or WAI. It was a social engineering project unlike anything Africa had ever seen. The military sought to force Nigerians to be orderly. Civil servants who arrived late to work were forced to perform frog jumps. Citizens were beaten by soldiers for failing to form neat queues at bus stops. The streets of Lagos, once chaotic and vibrant, became eerily silent as the fear of the whip replaced the freedom of the city. The discipline extended to the economy, which was in a tailspin. He introduced trade by barter with other nations to avoid using foreign currency. He ordered the execution of drug traffickers, a move that shocked the international community. Even backdating laws to ensure convictions, the regime showed a total disregard for legal norms. The message was clear: the state owned your body and your freedom. One wrong move could lead to a public execution at the Bar Beach in Lagos. The general's most controversial move was Decree No. 4. This law made it a crime to publish any report that brought the government into ridicule, even if the report was entirely true. Journalists were thrown into the infamous Kirikiri prison without trial. The free press was effectively strangled. This period marked a dark turn in the biography of a man who believed that the truth was secondary to the stability of his administration and the protection of his image. But the mystery deepened with the Dikko Affair in 1984. Umaru Dikko, a former minister accused of corruption, had fled to London. In a plot that felt like a spy thriller, Nigerian and Israeli agents drugged Dikko and stuffed him into a shipping crate labeled as diplomatic baggage. They intended to fly him back to Lagos to face trial. The crate was intercepted by British Customs at Stansted Airport just minutes before the plane was scheduled to take off for Nigeria. The international fallout from the botched kidnapping was catastrophic. Britain was outraged, and diplomatic ties were severed. Inside Nigeria, the economic hardship continued to bite. Food shortages became common, and the essential commodities queues grew longer every day. The general remained stoic, refusing to devalue the naira or take an IMF loan. He believed he could starve the nation into prosperity, but his own inner circle was beginning to tire of his rigid and uncompromising leadership style. In August 1985, the end came from within. While the general was observing the Eid holidays, his chief of army staff, Ibrahim Babangida, orchestrated a counter-coup. The iron leader was overthrown by his own generals, who accused him of being too rigid and failing to consult his colleagues. He was arrested and placed in detention for the next 3 years. The man who had sought to discipline a whole nation was now a prisoner of his own military. His time in detention was a period of silence and reflection. For years, he vanished from the public eye. Many believed his political career was buried in the 1980s. When he was finally released, he returned to his farm in Daura, seemingly content with a life of quiet retirement. However, the fire of ambition was not extinguished. He watched from the sidelines as Nigeria cycled through more coups, a short-lived democracy, and finally, the return to civilian rule in 1999. In the early 2000s, the general made a shocking announcement: he was running for president. To those who remembered his 1983 regime, it was a terrifying prospect. To others, frustrated by the corruption of the new democratic era, he was the incorruptible alternative. He lost in 2003, 2007, and 2011. Each time, he claimed the elections were rigged. He became the face of the opposition, a man who refused to go away, building a massive following in the north. The transformation was completed in 2015. He rebranded himself as a converted Democrat. He traded his military fatigues for the traditional Agboda and promised to fight the three-headed monster: corruption, insecurity, and the failing economy. The nation was at a breaking point with the Boko Haram insurgency. People were desperate for a strong man who could bring order back to the chaos. For the first time in Nigerian history, an opposition candidate defeated an incumbent president at the polls. Despite the slow start, he won a second term in 2019. His supporters praised his massive infrastructure projects, like the new railways and bridges across the country. But his second term was marred by the EndSARS protest, where young Nigerians took to the streets to demand an end to police brutality. The ghost of his military past seemed to return as the government's response was seen by many as heavy-handed, leading to the tragic events at the Lekki toll gate. Security remained his biggest challenge. While the military made gains against Boko Haram, new threats emerged in the form of banditry and kidnapping for ransom across the northwest. The man who was once feared for his ability to maintain order now presided over a nation where no one felt truly safe. The contrast between his 1984 discipline and his 2020 struggles was a source of constant debate among historians and the terrified populace in rural communities. In his final months, a chaotic currency redesign policy threw the country into turmoil. People were unable to access their own money, leading to riots at banks. It felt like echoes of the 1984 austerity measures. The president remained largely silent, appearing distant from the suffering of the common man. His critics saw it as a final act of the rigid soldier who believed that the end always justified the painful means, regardless of the human cost. During his later years, a bizarre conspiracy theory gripped the Nigerian internet, suggesting the leader had died and been replaced by a body double from Sudan. While fueled by his long medical absences and the nation's anxiety, the rumor highlighted the deep-seated mysteries surrounding his private life. Though debunked by the presidency, the Jubra myth remains a surreal chapter in the digital age of Nigerian political mystery and public distrust of their aging leaders. In May 2023, he finally stepped down, handing over power to his successor. He retired once again to his home in Daura, leaving behind a nation that was deeply divided over his legacy. To some, he was the only leader who tried to build real infrastructure and fight systemic corruption. To others, he was a man who stayed too long and did too little to stop the bleeding of a nation he once swore to protect with his life. The story of Muhammadu Buhari is the story of Nigeria itself, complex, contradictory, and often tragic. He was the soldier, the dictator, the prisoner, and the president. Whether he was a hero who saved the country from collapse or a rigid figure who held it back from its potential remains the ultimate mystery of the giant of Africa. As he fades into the quiet of the northern desert, his shadow still looms large over the future of the republic.